Hi, I'm Daniel Smith, Southwest Regional Agronomist for the University of Wisconsin-Madison and UW Extension's Nutrient Pest Management Program. And today I'm going to talk to you about water hemp seed dispersal. So when we look at water hemp seed dispersal, one of the most common ways water hemp seeds can move throughout a field is movement through a combine. So you see in this year one photo a small patch of water hemp plants that maybe have gotten missed by a herbicide pass or maybe germinated after the herbicide pass. And thus produce some viable seed. And out in the field at harvest time, the farmer makes the decision to go ahead and harvest that patch of weeds and put that seed into the combine. So then on year two, you're left with a nice 30-foot wide strip of water hemp seeds, water hemp plants rather, spread throughout the field. And then finally, this farmer makes a decision to harvest again and spreads that water hemp seed throughout the entire field. And these photos do a nice job of illustrating what can happen if we allow water hemp to go to seed and then run that seed throughout a combine. And they were taken by The Ohio State University. We look at water hemp seed, and why it makes it so tricky to hide in a combine is the seed size. So you look at the seed compared to the penny and the pinhead, and you can see it's a small, black, shiny seed. And it can very easily hide in our equipment and spread from within the field and then from field to field. We look at where a seed can hide in a combine, we start to think about where that tiny black seed can hide in all the nooks and weld joints and such in a combine. And we start to look at combines and where the residue hides. This photo is a fairly new combine that was extremely clean when we showed up at the producer's farm and had been cleaned from top to bottom, front to back, power washed inside and out, and it was a very nice combine. However, we're still able to find a little bit of biomass material that could be hiding weed seeds in some of those weld joints and cracks and crevices in the combine, such as where the feeder house and the head meet, and then right below the rotor region, there's a small area that could hide some weed seeds. So once we start to think about weed seeds and where they can hide in a combine, it can help us clean a combine a little bit better. We look at some research that's been done on this from Iowa State University and then thus published in a Purdue publication. We see that the header has quite a bit of pounds of biomass that was collected during a combine cleanout, as does the feeder house, the rock trap, grain tank, and unloading auger regions. And these areas all can be easily cleaned either by opening a door, maybe running the combine with those doors open, using some straw to pack in those areas and clean those areas by running the combine again, or just simply using a leaf blower or some compressed air. We can quickly clean a combine in, say, 30 minutes or less to minimize the risk of moving weed seeds from field to field. A complete combine clean out, however, though, we can expect to spend 4 to 8 hours depending on how thorough and what methods we choose to use to completely clean the combine. And this would be done when we're switching grains and switching from a GMO to a non-GMO grain and that type of thing. However, with just a simple investment of 30 minutes or so, we can quickly clean out the most troublesome regions with a leaf blower. Another way water hemp seeds can move is through waterfowl. And waterfowl can, in fact, move quite a few weed seeds as they eat them and ingest those weed seeds, and they carry them from field to field, from region to region even. Some recent research from the University of Missouri looked at this in detail, and they worked with sportsmen who'd harvested waterfowl to examine then and dissect what kind of weed seeds these waterfowl were carrying. And we see quite a number of water hemp seeds were being carried by these waterfowl. If we look at this table 3, we see there was 362 waterfowl sampled in this study, and we see that water hemp was one of the primary weed seed species found. There was 3,654 plants they found in the esophagus region, which totaled for about 37%. In the gizzard, there was 440, and then in the intestines, there was 146. And these were all water hemp plants that germinated after growing out those seeds that they found in those regions. So obviously, could be a troublesome way water hemp seeds are spreading from field to field and within regions. We look at water hemp fowl movement, and likely the waterfowl in the study were traveling through the Devil's Lake region of North Dakota, as illustrated by the green ducks that were in this study. But in the Mississippi River Valley region, the blue ducks are representing. These ducks could have also been included in the study, and they do travel through the Wisconsin and greater upper Midwest region. So something to be thinking about if these waterfowl are visiting our farms, maybe they are bringing us some water hemp seeds and something to scout for. This is further influenced if we look at a map of where water hemp has been found in Wisconsin versus waterways in Wisconsin. So we look at first the Mississippi River region. We see quite a few dots along that side of the state of Wisconsin. Clearly some water hemp is present in that region. Moving further into Wisconsin, we see the Wisconsin River region, and again water hemp seeds along that river suggest we're getting some waterfowl movement. We look at the Lake Winnebago region, again some more water hemp seeds, and then up into the Michigan, Lake Michigan region. If we look at the Chippewa flowage region, we see some water hemp seed movement again. So we could hypothesize that water hemp is being moved by waterfowl in Wisconsin. And it's something to scout for if we're having a lot of waterfowl visit our farm. Another way we can see water hemp seeds move on our farm is through the feed, seed, and bedding we use. So one of the most common ways we see Palmer amaranth come to some of our dairy farms is through cottonseed. So if we're using some of these additives in our rations, we certainly should be doing some scouting for these troublesome weeds to prevent them from going to seed. If we're taking some manure from a neighbor who's using some of these ingredients in their ration, again, we should be scouting for these weed seeds and preventing the weeds from going to seed after they germinate. And then finally, buying certified seed. So if we're going to be doing any sort of conservation or cover crop plantings, we should be buying some certified seed. And if we choose to use bin run seed, we should run a seed analysis test to see if there is any weed seeds in that we should be concerned about. We look at water hemp seed dispersal. This year we had a lot of flooding. We can think about what that water carries in it. We could hypothesize that water hemp seed was being floated from one field to another in this water. If our neighbors had water hemp, it could be easy that seed could be floated and moved on to our property. So if we're seeing some movement from neighbors to our field or vice versa, we should be scouting and seeing if that seed had moved through that water or not. And all this scouting is to prevent the weed seeds from causing us future problems. So we know that immediately in this current field season, yield loss can occur from competition from all those weed seeds germinating and producing a lot of weed to cause us trouble. We look at that because we're competing for light, water, and soil fertility resources. So this first photo of the soybean field shows the power of water hemp seed and how much can germinate and how much can spread from a relatively small population of water hemp. And think about the yield implications that may have. And then to illustrate those yield implications, I've included a photo of a giant ragweed field in Rock County, and showing that ear of corn next to my hand and how great that yield impact is, economic yield impact, and obviously something that we should invest in to prevent from occurring. We'll look at some future costs of water hemp seed management. First is going to be hand pulling. In the South, it's quite common to hand pull Palmer amaranth and water hemp, and it's fairly costly per acre. We think about failed herbicide attempts from having herbicide resistance develop and spread. Obviously, cost of tillage, not alone we have our fuel costs and our equipment wear and tear costs, but then we have the cost of soil erosion and soil conservation consequences. We have yield loss in current and future years from these weed populations. We have the increased cost to reduce the seed bank by utilizing more herbicide passes, maybe utilizing more tillage, utilizing more crop rotation techniques to try and control that weed seeds from spreading. And then we have some export restrictions. So other countries are becoming more mindful, as the Weed Science Society of America article suggests. China is becoming more interested in what kind of weed seeds we're exporting. Finally, this piece of equipment shown in the photo with the combine is the Harrington Seed Destroyer, and it was developed by a farmer in Australia named Ray Harrington. And it's a cage mill, and it takes the biomass from the combine and it will crack the seed coat of any weed seeds that go through that machine, thus making them no longer viable when they go out, sit on the ground, and they decompose. If we look at preventing water hemp seed movement, we want to avoid seed production. So obviously we want to use good pre-emergent herbicides. We want to use good cultural management techniques to prevent that weed seed from ever developing. We want to clean our equipment. So we want to clean our combines, we want to clean our planting equipment, we want to clean our tillage equipment to make sure that it doesn't spread weed seeds from field to field. We want to harvest any fields with resistance last. So these fields that have heavy infestations of water hemp that we know may be herbicide resistance, save those to the end of the harvest season and then do a final combine clean out after harvesting that field. That way we don't spread that field of water hemp seed from it to another field. Finally, we want to manage our field borders, our field waterways, our road ditches to prevent those weed seeds from migrating from those regions into the field. That can be a very important aspect of weed management that we often forget about is allowing those areas to go to seed. And then once they go to seed, they migrate farther into our field and they can start to cause us economic yield losses. That concludes my presentation today. I'd welcome any questions through email and phone conversations, and I encourage you to follow up with your local extension educator for more information.